Flight 19 was the designation of a group of 5 General Motors TBM Avenger torpedo bombers that disappeared over the Bermuda Triangle on December 5, 1945, after losing contact during a United States Navy overwater navigation training flight from Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale, Florida. All 14 airmen on the flight were lost, as were all 13 crew members of a Martin PBM Mariner flying boat that subsequently launched from Naval Air Station Banana River to search for Flight 19. A report by Navy investigators concluded that flight leader Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor mistook small islands offshore for the Florida Keys after his compasses stopped working, resulting in the flight heading over open sea and away from land. The report was later amended by the Navy to read, "Cause unknown," to avoid blaming Taylor for the loss of 5 aircraft and 14 men. The report attributed the loss of the PBM aircraft to an explosion in midair while searching for the flight. Flight 19 undertook a routine navigation and combat training exercise in TBM-type aircraft. The assignment was called Navigation Problem No. 1, a combination of bombing and navigation, which other flights had completed or were scheduled to undertake that day. The flight leader was United States Navy Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor, who had about 2,500 flying hours, mostly in aircraft of this type, while his trainee pilots each had 300 total, and 60 flight hours in the Avenger. Taylor had completed a combat tour in the Pacific Theater as torpedo bomber pilot on the aircraft carrier USS Hancock and had recently arrived from NAS, Miami, where he had also been a VTB instructor. The student pilots had recently completed other training missions in the area where the flight was to take place. The aircraft were 3 TBM-1Cs, 1 TBM-1E, and 1 TBM-3. Each aircraft was a version of the Grumman TBF Avenger, built by General Motors Eastern Aircraft Division under wartime production license. Under the U.S. Navy aircraft designation system used during World War II, Grumman-built Avengers were designated TBF and GM-built aircraft such as these were designated TBM. Each was fully fueled, and during pre-flight checks, it was discovered they were all missing clocks. Navigation of the route was intended to teach dead reckoning principles, which involved calculating, among other things, elapsed time. The apparent lack of timekeeping equipment was not a cause for concern as it was assumed each man had his own watch. Takeoff was scheduled for 13:45 local time, but the late arrival of Taylor delayed departure until 14:10. Weather at NAS Fort Lauderdale was described as favorable, sea state moderate to rough. Taylor was supervising the mission, and a trainee pilot had the role of leader out front. Called Naval Air Station, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Navigation Problem No. 1. The exercise involved 3 different legs, but the actual flight should have flown 4. They flew on heading 091 degree for 56 nmi until reaching Hens and Chickens Shoals, commonly called Chicken Rocks, where low-level bombing practice was carried out. The flight was to continue on that heading for another 67 nmi before turning onto a course of 346 degrees for 73 nmi, in the process overflying Grand Bahama Island. The next scheduled turn was to a heading of 241 degrees to fly 120 nmi, at the end of which the exercise was completed and the Avengers would turn left to then return to NAS featuring Lauderdale. Radio conversations between the pilots were overheard by base and other aircraft in the area. The practice bombing operation is known to have been carried out because at about 1500 a pilot requested and was given permission to drop his last bomb. 40 minutes later, another flight instructor, Lieutenant Robert F. Cox in FT-74, who was forming up with his group of students for the same mission, received an unidentified transmission. An unidentified crew member asked Powers, one of the students, for his compass reading. Powers replied, "I don't know where we are. We must have got lost after that last turn." Cox then transmitted, "This is FT-74, plane or boat calling, Powers, please identify yourself so someone can help you." The response after a few moments was a request from the others in the flight for suggestions. FT-74 tried again and a man identified as Fort 28 came on. FT-28, "This is FT-74, what is your trouble?" "Both of my compasses are out," Taylor replied, "and I am trying to find Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I am over land but it's broken. I am sure I'm in the Keys but I don't know how far down and I don't know how to get to Fort Lauderdale." FT-74 informed the NAS that aircraft were lost, then advised Taylor to put the sun on his port wing and fly north up the coast to Fort Lauderdale. Base operations then asked if the flight leader's aircraft was equipped with a standard YG, which could be used to triangulate the flight's position, but the message was not acknowledged by FT-28. Instead, at 16:45, FT-28 radioed, "We are heading 030 degrees for 45 minutes, then we will fly north to make sure we are not over the Gulf of Mexico." During this time no bearings could be made on the flight, and IFF could not be picked up. This order was not acknowledged, so he was asked to switch to 3000 kHz, the search and rescue frequency. Taylor replied, "I cannot switch frequencies. I must keep my planes intact." At 1656, Taylor was again asked to turn on his transmitter for YG if he had one. He did not acknowledge, but a few minutes later advised his flight, change course to 090 degrees for 10 minutes. About the same time someone in the flight said, "Damn it, if we could just fly west we would get home. Head west, damn it." This difference of opinion later led to questions about why the students did not simply head west on their own. It has been explained that this can be attributed to military discipline. As the weather deteriorated, radio contact became intermittent, and it was believed that the 5 aircraft by this point were more than 200 nmi out to sea east of the Florida Peninsula. Taylor radioed, "We'll fly 270 degrees west until landfall or running out of gas," and requested a weather check at 1724. By 1750 several land-based radio stations had triangulated Flight 19's position as being within a 100 nmi radius of 29 degrees north 79 degrees west. Flight 19 was north of the Bahamas and well off the coast of central Florida, but nobody transmitted this information on an open, repetitive basis. At 1804, Taylor radioed to his flight, holding 270. "We didn't fly far enough east. We may as well just turn around and fly east again." By that time, the weather had deteriorated even more and the sun had set. Around 1820, Taylor's last message was received.